Because that's a district you really got to handle.
Yeah, so I was just asking, because I know their friends too. I was like, are you canceling your friends?
Going to call the school board meeting to order on today's date, January 19th, 2023 at 7:02 p.m. If everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get an approval of the consent agenda? Or an action?
Madam President, what about public forum?
Oh, sorry. Is anyone here for public forum?
There's not.
Thank you. Can I get an approval of the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Can I get a second? Any abstentions before we start?
Abstain.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda approved. Okay, 2023 COPS by Lorenzo Boyd and Sean Flynn.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I think you have a resolution for the Series 2023 COPS that you're later going to adopt pass this evening. But as you know, about 6 weeks ago, we started financing for $3 million in certificates of participation for the school district. A little over a month ago, we sent out bids. We sent out bids to over 22 potential bank investors. We had 8 that indicated that they were interested in putting a bid in, and then 5 that actually submitted a bid. And from the package, what you'll see is Webster Bank, which I think was a very aggressive bid for a 15-year transaction. They actually bid a rate of 3.99%, and that's what we opted to accept for the school district. I believe we closed on 2/2, February 2nd, so that'll be the day that Webster Bank will borrow the funds to the school district to close the transaction. But you'll see the other bids there. The second bid was Clayton Holdings, which is actually Commerce Bank. They were at 4.15%, Science Bank at 4.3%, and then we had option 1 for MRH Bank at 4.65%, and then we had Capital One put in the bid at 5.07. So you see the difference between the first bid and the last bid was 108 basis points, which is a pretty wide spread. So if you guys were willing to accept the Webster bid, we'll actually get that approved on the agenda, and then we'll be set to close on February 2nd and we'll advance the school district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work, yes.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Lorenzo.
it.
Good work. Thank you.
Any questions for Sean?
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Lorenzo. Okay, construction change orders, Chris.
Okay, not a whole lot going on this month. Good evening, everybody. We are in change order 28 in an amount of $27,458.68. This is related to overtime, some classroom door hardware changes, mainly related to safety and security. Added a door, and we're still cleaning up some of the changes due to the math classroom renovations on the 4th floor. And of course, the credit of about $91,000 for the value engineering items that we've added. I will tell you that you'll see in change orders in the next couple of months some adds to accept the modifications related to that, but we will still net out, along with a couple other items, right around that $85,000 to $90,000 savings on those value engineering items. And we're not done yet, so we're still looking.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Board Policy Batch 2022B. Dr. Jameson.
Good evening, Board. I come before you today to present Policy Batch 2022B. It includes 14 policies as a result of changes to MSIP 6, in addition to changes in recent laws. Within the particular policies that are being presented, 12 of the 14 policies are being presented as adopt as presented at the next board meeting. The board policy DB annual budget, you'll see that there are some modifications that have been made primarily to who is designated to actually lead the work associated with establishing procedures for the budget. So it still identifies the superintendent as the person serving as the board's designee, but it highlights who actually will be completing the work. It does not name the individual specifically, but the role that will carry out that particular piece. And you'll see the modification there. And then also board policy JHC. The modifications to this particular policy associated with Senate Bill 681 are more or less associated with what they would like for us to create, which is an advisory council. We currently have our wellness committee in place, which meets the requirements outlined in the policy, so we didn't see a benefit of actually adding yet another committee. In addition to this particular policy, we have made the modifications around page 2, physical examination and screenings, to include the word invasive, so the district will not conduct invasive examinations of students without notifying parents unless it's resulting in the safety of the student or other students within that space. These particular policies will come back to the board as a second read and also for adoption. Are there any questions in regards to the policies that are being presented tonight?
No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, admin communications 401 MRH facilities update. Greg Chambliss, Professional Services Industries.
Yeah, we've asked Greg Chambliss from PSI to come and explain some of the findings at the elementary school. Just to give this a little bit of context as Greg's getting ready, on the 26th of December, one of our 4-inch main sprinkler fire suppression lines at the elementary froze and then subsequently burst, flooding the first floor of the elementary with thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water. And the full extent of the financial impact of that damage is yet to be fully determined. We're getting there. But as we were going through that cleanup process, we encountered some other challenges that we were presented with, and Greg's here to explain some of that to us now.
Good evening. I'm Greg Chambliss. I'm the department manager for PSI here in St. Louis on the environmental division. Again, like Chris said, the 4-inch water main broke. So that was on the 26th, 27th. Chris contacted First On Site, which is a water mitigation company. They came in and basically started cutting out wet drywall, wet items, cleaning things, carpeting, the carpet squares. They extracted water, dried them out. They had fans, dehumidifiers. They had a big desiccant to try to dry out everything as much as possible. And they did that from on the 27th. And while they were doing that, they had fans installed. While they were doing that, they did find there's less than 1 square foot of areas of mold. More than likely, because they got in so quick, this had nothing to do with the recent water main break. This was probably some historic stuff that was inside wall cavities or something before that, since then. So when they found it, they put a little plastic containment around it, cut it out, and then put sanitizer and cleaned everything up. So from the 27th to the 6th, January 6th, they were doing cleaning, drying, desiccant, drying everything out, doing a lot of different work. On the 5th, during that time frame, they had 15 2,000 cubic feet per minute fans and humidifiers blowing. They had 13 600. So they were moving a lot of air in there, moving things around. On the 5th, we were contacted by Chris to come in and do some mold sampling. Let's see where we're at fungal-wise and everything. So when we came in and we were picking different, just random areas. There was nothing that was here or here. We just picked random areas throughout the school. First floor and second floor, because the library is opened up to the second floor. So on the 5th, we came in and we were surprised at how much activity was still going on there. They were still doing some cutout. They were doing some reconstruction. There was teachers. They were installing drywall. It was a lot of activity. So we were kind of surprised at that. So it was more, while we did our sampling, it was more of a construction zone than a school zone. So when we got our sample results back, we rushed the results, sent them to an independent lab here in St. Louis, and we did find elevated counts of some mold spores. Aspergillus penicillium was the main one. So we notified Chris that afternoon, and then pretty much immediately, the decision was made is let's let the teachers know. Let's try to get the teachers request that they don't come back to school or come back to school the next day for all the cleaning and stuff. We met with Chris first on site that next morning, which was the 6th, which I think was a Friday, or met up with them that morning on the 6th, walked through the facility, and basically put our heads together and try to figure out what do we need to do. We want to get school open and everything else. What do we need to do? So at the time, it was determined that we need to get all these fans that are blowing everything around. We need to get those shut off and out of there. So we had all the fans shut off. We had the big desiccant unit shut down, and we brought in HEPA filtered air filtration devices. HEPA, for anybody that doesn't know, is a high efficiency particulate air filter. It is 99.97% efficient down to 0.3 microns. Again, it's going to clean anything there is in the air. So they're very good. So we recommended bringing in all those units. We recommended is let's evaluate the air system. Something doesn't seem right if it doesn't work. So Chris had a company come in, they looked at the duct work. We're thinking some of these ducts are capped and it shouldn't be or something. We're not getting enough makeup air, we're not getting enough air exchanges. So that's making the rooms stale, we're not getting air movement in there. That's the reason we're still getting some of these high counts. So lo and behold, what we found out is instead of the ducts, being capped, is they are open on the top end, so the duct work was correct. So that was good. What we did find out though is the air returns were very, very, very dirty. So we're not getting the air movement in the schools and in the rooms like we should. So that was our recommendation. Let's clean the return air, let's clean the supply airs, let's get everything clean as we can. So they installed again, they put, sorry about that, on Friday they installed 52 additional HEPA filter units in that school. So again, if the air was being filtered, being cleaned a lot. So after the weekend is they wiped all the surfaces down, starting the top all the way down, cleaning the air. We had, Chris had his company, or had the company come in and let's flush out the air system. We found out that we can bring in 100% outside air. So let's flush out that air system. So we did that. That started Friday night, all day Saturday. We got shut down and turned back over to a normal school building, air circulation and stuff on Sunday morning. We came back on Monday morning at 8 o'clock and ran additional air samples. Okay, where are we at now after doing all this cleaning? Can we open school up? Can we get people in here safely and make sure that it's okay? So on that afternoon on the 9th is we've got 12 air sample results. All of them showed that their levels basically were pretty much minimal and were less than the outside or the outdoor averages. So again, as we basically said, based on visual observations, if everybody's been over there, all the drywall's cut up and everything else, it's a very clean school. We even ran one in the gym that we didn't do before, showed non-detect. So we had no spores at all in the gym, which we were betting is I bet this is going to be high because of wood floor. So it was clean. So again, after that afternoon of the 9th, we recommended is everything looks good. Post-remediation as the criteria has been passed, which there's no levels. It's not like asbestos or anything else. There's no safe levels that somebody says, but you compare inside versus outside because the mold is everywhere. Every time somebody opens the door, we're breaking in with our HVAC. So it's everywhere. So our best bet is whatever's inside, it's got to be the same spores, but less than outside. And then that's what we had, and we recommended is let's get the school open. It appears to be safe. Any questions? Wow. Again, I know I was going fast. I know y'all got other things to talk about.
I just want to add, just from a communication standpoint and thinking about the efforts, want to shout out my team members and the number of hours that they invested in the work. So those individuals, some of them are here. We had Dr. Dietrich, he jumped straight in as the interim director of operations. You had Chris Hoser, the teaching and learning team. It was a collaborative effort, and I would be remiss to not publicly thank them for that. But also the outlining the focus of how we actually communicated with community. It was more or less better to give very specific communication that was timely but also comprehensive, that outlined for our community what the work was being done versus small breadcrumbs along the way. But continuing to recognize that we are still post-pandemic and some of the trauma associated with the experiences that might have happened, and continuing to repair those relationships with our community. But I will continue to contend that we position our staff and students to enter into a space that was safe and ensuring that they were able to get the resources that they need. So I did want to share that, and also thank PSI and I believe TRICO as well, because the first onset, the water removal, custodians, everybody was all hands on deck. So I think it's important that we recognize their efforts as well.
Just
I agree with that, because Chris, is any recommendation we made, Chris was right on it. You know, again, we collaborated, we talked, and again, we found out about the HVAC system, being able to flush the air out, that was great. But, you know, we sometimes when it comes to spending a dollar to try to be safe and everything else, there's always usually some feedback or some pushback. You know, Chris is, whatever we got to do to keep everybody safe and get the school open and everything else, we want to do this as safe as possible. So again, it was none of this stuff is ever a joy, but it was nice to work with someone that understands and says, okay, the safety of our kids, our students, and everything else, that's utmost importance. So, any questions?
to give, just briefly, to give you some sense of scale of the labor hours that we're talking about, from January 3rd to January 6th, which was the Saturday, I believe, maybe the 7th was the Saturday, we've got nearly 1,200 labor hours that were put into that building just from hired subcontractors. That doesn't include my time, doesn't include Mike's time. Mike was up here on that Saturday letting contractors in to finish up demolition efforts and do more sterilization and sanitation. So those hours aren't complete yet. We still have yet to begin the rebuild, which will start in the next couple weeks here. But then we're going to go back into hundreds and hundreds of labor hours. So this was the biggest event that I think we've experienced on the disaster side, and I hope the biggest one that we ever have to deal with on the disaster side here in the district, at least in my 23 years. So it's just a really big public thank you to everybody, including Premier Demolition, who sent us 10 of their laborers when we were still trying to get out-of-town crews up from first on site. They sent a crew up from Texas, a crew of 20 from Texas to us. Everybody, it was awe-inspiring, the amount of work and the dedication that all these individuals had for places that they've never even seen or heard of before. So thank you to all of them.
Chris, can you outline the remediation efforts for the location of the pipe? I know we talked about that.
Oh, sure. So this doesn't happen again? Yeah, so we brought in Trico and Ryan Smith, who's back here. Him, along with Micah, Rufa, and TJ Weiss was the subcontractor. They did some exploration in the vestibule area and discovered that there was some air infiltration from the soffit vents on the outside of the building, the exterior of the building, that was coming into that vestibule, blowing all that cold air. Remember, it got into -2, -5 in some areas. For that whole Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and we determined that that was the likely cause of that pipe freezing. We did freeze that pipe a couple years ago in the same area, but it was the small pipe attached to the sprinkler head. This was the main that all the sprinkler heads attached to. And it didn't break the pipe, it blew off the collar. So that collar has actually been sent back to the manufacturer. Our mechanical engineer picked it up this morning, and they're going to send that off to their metallurgist to figure out why that thing failed and if there's anything they can do to make it not fail again under those conditions. So that's Vitrolic was the manufacturer of that. So we Trico suggested some changes, so we implemented those. We took the drywall all the way up to the roof deck. We insulated it on with, I can't remember the R value of that insulation, but the foam insulation. And then we crazy insulated the pipe. And we're confident by blocking that air, insulating the space. Oh, and then our mechanical engineer also recommended that we put in 2 passive air vents that would allow the air to circulate up into the indoor soffit space to, in the event that there is cold up there, that we're at least bringing, through natural convection, bringing that warm air into that space and somewhat conditioning it. So we are reasonably confident that we've at least solved the problem. The additional impact of having those vents is now we can sample the temperature in that space. It is an interstitial space, so it's not readily accessible, but now with those vents we can get into it. So it's very reasonable during weather periods where it's going to be cold like that we can dispatch somebody to that building to monitor the temperature in that space. I've even thought about, this is pie in the sky, even thought about putting a temperature monitor in there like we do our freezers and coolers that would alert us if it reaches a certain temperature. So that's something that we're looking at as well.
Do we have an ETA on when we might have a timeline of when all of the construction is done for that?
Construction is a funny thing. It never goes like you plan, as you well know by now. So the timeline that I established is very aggressive. In a perfect world, I want it done by April 1st. At least the bulk of it. That's not going to happen. We're going to push as hard as we can. We're using spring break as a spot where no one's in the building, so we can come in and do a lot of flooring, we can do a lot of painting, some sanding. And it's worth mentioning too, while we're doing that work, I've asked First On-Site and their rebuild teams to bring in HEPA filters, which they've left on site, to have those in the spaces where they're reattaching drywall, because the walls will be open again. When they sand the joint cement, that'll be with a vacuum sander, or vac sand that. They'll be wiping everything down when they leave. All the drywall will be cut outside, or at least in a space that's contained, if it's inclement weather. All crews will be 3:30 p.m. or beyond. So not only did we take seriously the conditions when we discovered the mold and the mitigation efforts to fix it, we're continuing a good portion of those efforts as we move through the reconstruction, because the reconstruction will be extensive and it's going to be many, many labor hours. So, one other item, Mike Dietrich was able to work with IFS, our HVAC contractor, to have GPS bipolar ionization units installed on our two main air handlers on the roof. So those were installed at a very deep discount, because last time we checked it, they weren't as inexpensive as they were when they installed them. So thank you, IFS. So they installed those on the Monday. Yeah, so air sampling on Thursday, mitigation efforts began on Friday, air movement through the building, flushing all weekend, air sampling on Monday, followed by installation of ionization units on the same day. So it was a concert of activity through that entire week.
Just want to also thank the
It
board.
goes to show is how important Chris is and what Richmond Heights is. You all aren't the only school district that experienced burst pipes and everything else. And everybody was maxed out, but we're going to be able to get all that stuff done that quick. That basically says something about Chris and how the industry and how people in St. Louis respect what he does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, I appreciate you noting that this is the most significant disaster that we've experienced in the district, at least in recent memory. So I assume we've learned a lot of, we have a lot of takeaways from this situation, including that pre-existing mold can have an impact that we don't discover until we hit an emergency situation like this. Is there an opportunity for us to rearrange our protocols such that should an event like this happen again, air quality testing is one of the first orders of action after the immediate remediation?
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. It's quick, and I'm not sure that the lab is going to be willing to rush to the extent that we rushed them on these two air tests. They really, the lab really turned those results over quickly. But I think it is reasonable to do that. The health and safety and welfare of our staff and students are of utmost importance, and we would never want to intentionally or willingly, knowingly put them in a situation where their health was in any sort of jeopardy. That's an easy thing to do, and I think this time, not to make excuses, but to give reasons, this time I think our administrative team and teachers included, we were laser focused on getting kids back into school as quickly as possible, and I think that will remain the focus. We will just flip some of our protocols. Instead of doing it at the end, we'll do it at the beginning. And then I think we may have to make a difficult decision again to postpone the start of school or to send kids home early or things like that if similar disasters, heaven forbid, occur again. But at least we know now what protocols to initiate first and which ones to do second.
And part of that also includes some of our crisis planning with the approval from the board with our contractor. Those are some of the conversations that we're having with Ed regarding like what types of things do we need to have in place and from whom the messages need to come. And so typically when you begin to talk about a crisis, like does a crisis need to come from your district communications person? Does it need to come from the superintendent? What messages need to be communicated from your building principal? And then how is that codified and actually demonstrated for the community to see so that it's not a guessing game in regards to what should occur? So we're excited about the learning with opportunities. I tell people if you're perfect, you don't have an opportunity to reflect around the mistakes or efforts to make adjustments to be better. So it's all about the work. And we're excited about the partnership and the things that we've learned during this process, and our ability to work cohesively as a team is a part of that as well.
Can you speak a little bit to the what sort of sampling may happen between now and the end of this school year as well? I think we've been notified that there'll be at least some air sampling just to kind of continue to maintain a baseline of some sort.
Right, and Chris and I, we haven't really talked about exactly what we're looking at, but it would probably be more of what type of sampling we do that we can get back quick. It's called an aerosol, and what it does is it basically pulls the air onto a sticky slide inside a filter. They read, that way the lab can read it right away. It doesn't have to grow or anything else in a petri dish. Typically those take 2 weeks. And it's like, well, we probably don't have 2 weeks to sit there and wait.
Right.
So it tells us, all spores, whether viable or dead or living, either one. Because dead spores can be allergenic and everything else. So we do it that way and we get results pretty quickly. So that'd probably be more what we do, would be more random representative areas like that, because what we try to do is each HVAC unit is try to get sampling for each of those units so it's represented. We're not going to go in and sample one little corner. We're going to try to do we don't want to sample every 10 square feet of space because we don't need to spend that much money.
Right.
So we're going to do representative of rooms, areas, things like that.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Again, we're going to want to do it not during a construction activity or anything else because that's going to overload our cassettes and that's going to show things that shouldn't really be there when teachers or students are there.
Sure, of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Greg.
evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Program evaluation, early childhood preschool, PAT, by Dr. Stephanie Betchard and Loyette. Is it Betchard? Betchard? Okay, it is Betchard. Just wanted to be sure. Okay.
Push the screen share button, Stephanie.
I'm very attached.
Your call is important, Jess. Please stand by. Just breathe through it. We'll get it done.
Good news is we do have access to it on
Yeah,
our
we're looking
computers.
at your slides.
Yeah, so.
Go ahead and go. Over.
Since we're not using the screen, we'll see. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Board of Education. Thank you to Dr. Jameson for allowing us to present. Dr. Bouchard and I are co-presenting as her role includes collaboration with the preschool programming and parents as teachers She's also housed at the ECC. We love having her with us as a support as well as a central office person for our building.
We also want to thank the finance department and Dr. McGee for their contributions and feedback on this presentation, and also to Dr. Leah for the beautiful welcome in her building.
All right, so we're on to the program overview. As you see our presentation, I take on the preschool side of things, and Dr. Bashar will take on parents as teachers. So we're on to the preschool program overview. We are this year relaunching the Reggio approach after restarting preschool services during the 21-22 school year. One unique feature to our programming has been implementing preschool specials to enhance our programming of School Studio. The key piece of bringing in preschool specialists are 5 amazing specialists in the different realms of music, art, PE, seat to table, as well as the librarian. It has allowed us to embrace our preschool teachers to be part of the PLC model. So formally, excuse me, I'm not going to cough this time. Formally, our preschool teachers have not had the time weekly to collaborate. And now that our district is investing in the PLC model, the professional learning community model, we thought it was really important that our preschool teachers also do the same. So we have weekly collaboration for our PLC time. Another unique feature has been our First Friends program. As you already know, that includes our 2-year-old morning programming, which serves as a jumpstart to our preschool programming when our students turn 3. So that is a nice feature that is in common in many schools, having a program for our 2-year-olds.
The Maple Ridge Heights Parents as Teachers program is a phenomenal program. If you're not familiar with Parents as Teachers, I would encourage you to seek me out. I'd be happy to take a home visit with one of our wonderful parent educators. It's an absolutely tremendous support to the parents in school districts. It is one of those things that is required by the state of Missouri. However, it started here in Missouri, and the relationship between the State Department, the Parents as Teachers National Center that's right here in St. Louis, as well as the school districts is pretty powerful. Over the last several years, they have managed to really listen to supervisors, area coordinators across the state of Missouri and develop some different avenues for success for those programs. One of those being the Missouri Curriculum Partner. This means that at the Missouri School District, we are given the great access to their trainings and the trainings through DESE, as well as access to the Parents as Teachers curriculum to continue to utilize the families. It is a very research-based, great curriculum pushing supports out for parents. Parents as Teachers is comprised of 4 components. It has home visiting, personal home visits for families for children under the age of 5. It also has developmental screenings for children under the age of 5, as well as group connections, which is what most people are familiar with. Those are like the play dates, sort of fun library trips, things like that they do with all of those families as well. And then finally, they also help families connect with any kinds of resources they need. So they work with other partners and programs and seek out other resources for any supports parents need. Next up, you will look at some data from both of these programs.
As I presented last month, you have already seen this graph, but we're being really intentional about utilizing data to build on future plans, specifically in preschool. So the state of Missouri began requiring a kindergarten entry assessment this past school year, of which here are results for the fall of 2022. Our preschool teachers analyze these results during our newly implemented PLC time. You can see from this graph that 45 are returning students were kindergarten ready, 27 were not. So we have set goals based on doing a deep dive into this data for preschool programming, as well as goals you'll see that we highlight later on in this, the last slide.
The data that you have from Parents as Teachers, I really wanted to pull some historical data for both your purposes and mine. Being new, I wanted to see some trend data over the course of several years. That's why you see several years building up. The good news is that even through some of the pandemic shutdown, some of your services really remain steady, which is great. That means the parents still have supports. It's really important that, especially during this time, parents have access to supports. And National Center did a tremendous job of pushing out virtual trainings for home visitors. It was probably the best rollout of virtual trainings with the quickest turnaround, and all of a sudden everybody just knew what they needed to do, and we're doing virtual visits, even knowing how difficult that is for small children. So it was a great transition to have that as a resource, and it also opened a door that allows us to continue to do that. So previously, Parents as Teachers would go through a lot of cancellation virtual visits, telephone visits, and in-person visits in order to make sure that all of those supports are there for the families who choose to utilize those services in those ways. One of the goals that you'll see us talk about is the developmental screening. The State Department of Jesse has a goal of making sure that they increase tremendously the numbers of screenings of children under the age of 5. Many years ago, we used to do a lot of screenings, and then about 15 years ago, they started making some cuts, and that was one of the things to go. And Jesse is really trying to get back to making sure that the home visiting services as well as the screening funding is there. And the last year, we were able to $5 million increase in the line item budget for parents teachers home visiting, which increased the allocation to Next up, we have some budgetary information for you.
All right, so costs of staffing and supplies continue to go up. Total expenditures are just over $1 million for our preschool programming. Total revenues are just under $700,000. While we do have more expenditures than revenues, we thank our school board, we thank our district for the important investment in early education.
You can also see that there is an increased local effort when it comes to the Parents as Teachers program. We do also want to continue to look, however, to close that gap with the Parents as Teachers funding. There's ways to do that, and the number one way is to increase our assistance to families. And so that is something that we're looking at doing, is making sure that we are maximizing the services to the families who need it, the families who want it, and making sure there's open access for all, for both developmental screenings and for the home visiting services. Those are the two funding streams that come in through that. Other things that we do with Parents as Teachers are the things that I would consider your rural activities for the first portion. So, finally, where does all of this information leave us? We've developed a couple of goals for each of the programs to look forward to in the next year or so in developing. One of those goals for the Parents as Teachers program and the preschool programs in particular is to ensure that we have really deep collaboration and good relationships between all of those programs, whether that's First Steps, SSD, the First Friends program, the preschool teachers, and Parents as Teachers program, making sure that families have access to those resources and that we know about them coming in, and that we're all joining forces to make sure that those are resources families can access well. So we're looking to increase the collaboration between all of those entities. And then what I talked about earlier was the DESI goal of increasing screenings. We are looking at increasing the developmental screenings for children under the age of 5. We will be looking to increase that by doing screenings of children who are already in the preschool, children who are entering into the preschool, Parents as Teachers children. If you know of anyone that's under the age of 5 and would like a developmental screening, feel free to contact Parents as Teachers, because we would like to make sure that those parents have that support and that information about their child. They are their child's first and best teacher, and we want to make sure that they know it, and we want to make sure that they have the support to do that.
I'll just add, we're very excited because we're opening up a couple evenings to be screeners for all the incoming preschoolers. So in doing so, it'll help us create balanced class lists that we haven't had in the past. So we're excited to make sure we are appropriately placing students based on the screeners. The next two bullet points are related to the preschool. So as we continue to analyze the changing needs of the community, we want to continue to look at enrollment processes and slots to ensure that we really are serving the community. Even in the past year, it has changed a little bit on full enrollment and who is enrolling in which type of programming. So one goal we do have is to ensure that we are meeting both family needs along with yearly funds that are available. And the last bullet point is ensuring that all preschool students entering kindergarten will be kindergarten ready. I took our conversation from our last board meeting related to our goals around preschool, and our preschool staff is digging into that more. So that readiness of letter identification, we're going into a deeper dive on what does that mean, what does that look like, which assessments are we using. So I appreciated that feedback from the board, and our preschool team and that PLC time is really digging deeper into that, along with developmental appropriateness and where our preschoolers should be, and really honing in on those 5-year-old students that are entering preschool and making sure that we're identifying where they should be as we prepare for kindergarten readiness. So that is our goal as well. And as a final note, we would like to thank our preschool staff and our Parents as Teachers staff for their commitment to early ed, and this would be possible without their dedication.
They really are tremendous. Both the Parents as Teachers staff is new, but they are really digging in and jumping right into
Could you elaborate, sorry, on the, Dr. Loyette, on the trends in community need that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what we saw this past year is we did lose some families because we could not secure the before and after care. So there were some, we did not reach full enrollment like we have in the past because we did not have the staff members for ratio for our before and after care. And so our half-day programming is trending to be a little bit less than it has in the past. And so we wonder what that means for our community. Will that change this year? We're undergoing the start to enrollment. We'll be enrolling in the next few weeks. So we're very curious to see if those slots change, to see if we are being fully enrolled in the different areas that may have been popular pre-pandemic that may not be meeting the needs of the families as much anymore. As well as our push to really fill all of our Head Start positions. It's really important that our preschool population mirrors what our kindergarten population does. It doesn't yet. So working with our parent educators to make sure we're identifying families who we can have early intervention and making sure we're supporting earlier on to see if we can fill more likely the full day slots, but just seeing where the needs are in the community if that answers a little bit.
And so, and just to back off, a top add on to that, some of the other conversations that we have had as far as early childhood is concerned, is a very unique beast because it has a few different funding streams. So we're also looking at some of the alternative funding streams like the ADA funding that is available to a certain percentage of our students in this district. And the challenge with some of the families that really may need even just the whole day preschool is that there is no transportation for that. And so we're trying to problem solve around some of those issues. While this is a very small condensed area, it still is going to be an issue in the middle of winter if you're trying to trade some schnooks on down even just to early childhood. It's not really far distance, but in 30-degree weather with piles of snow, it's going to be difficult. So we're looking at some alternatives and trying to come up with some plans in order to really round out the program in the future as it goes. It's just going to take some time to solve the problem. The parents as teachers is that first step. Kayleen Portel is a social worker in that building, and she's also been very instrumental in identifying families, talking about sliding scales for families, and we're really looking at who has that, how do we get a hold of them, and how do we get kids qualified for some of those spots that we're really
As part of the collaboration between the preschool program and the kindergarten program and the PAT, I would be really curious to see that added to the data graph. The number of children who participated in PAT who were kindergarten ready or unprepared. I mean, again, I think I have some assumptions about who's utilizing the program in the district, and it would be interesting to see if the data, what that reveals.
Yes. So currently, as far as parents and teachers is concerned, we're running through the data with 2 million people and stuff, families. We're also trying to make sure that one is accurate and that it's consistent, and we're just trying to make sure it's also before reporting some data as far as where they go from there. We do think that parents as teachers is a really good feeder into the preschool program for a lot of people, but also knowing that you can see on that graph too, so you can see some of the tiniest families that we are servicing as well as the non-tiniest families that get serviced. And so getting that word out to those families is pretty vital. So those have been conversations with Kayleen and the parent educators as far as they're trying to target some of the areas that we target on people to get involved in the program.
Some of those conversations have just been our K1 and 2 students who have little siblings that we see go through the car line and, oh, you have a 2-year-old or you have a newborn.
Yep.
The word of mouth is what we see, and obviously we can take more data as we continue to see how are we reaching the families that need families.
Yeah, but we'll definitely have some next year for
Well, along those lines, so is your sense that the decline in high-need family participation since 2018 is more about outreach and less about changing demographics?
So without having been able to talk with those families, I actually don't feel very comfortable saying that I make those conversations quite accurate. So high needs designations come based off of those conversations and visits with families on very particular set of characteristics that were designated as high needs. And so know what I've trained the new parent educators to be able to do and see and understand. I don't know what was previously done. I'm sure it was fine. I don't have any of the historical information for that. I know what I found in my previous district was that we just had parent educators that were not taking the time to market. And so when you don't market in the report system, then I don't get the right data for the report. So that's why training these ladies correctly the first time around and making sure that those are correct. It's something we do with staff meetings. Have we review the last time for kids, have we reviewed the items list, and we have things like all of that. I have a plenty of data in the previous district. I think I got a call from Betsy Why, which remembers that place, as long as she can tell them why. It was like that, they were able to say, oh, okay, and continue to find out. It's definitely something to do with that.
We were also intentional in the hiring process to ask those questions. Are you willing to go to, set apartments and recruit? And what does that look like? What does it look like to have an equitable parents as teachers program? And so I think those questions are really important, and we were able to identify 2 people that we hired that are willing to do that work, and now being really focused on making sure that our numbers continue to evolve, giving them a chance to also build the program, because what happened was they were not trained to actually start seeing families until mid-late September, like October. And so making sure that they're able to reach the families that were promised to be reached first. So I think that's something going into the summer and looking at recruitment, making sure that we are meeting all our families.
And getting over that is they're starting a recruit actually, which will start more work as well. And speaking as a person as a parent who did parents as teachers, I learned something every single time, and I do this for a living with small children. You'd think I would know, but it is something that is universal access, which means it's open to everybody who wants it. And so we want to make sure we continue to do that, but it's open for everybody. So we may have some more staff if we have, over little parents, which is a great thing to have, but that's the goal is to make sure that everybody that wants it.
I really appreciate looking at it through an equitable lens as well, because I think that, a lot of programs don't necessarily have that lens, and it's a difficult conversation to have. Hey, is this truly equitable? And how do we make it more equitable? But I appreciate the work that you guys are doing to reach out to the families and to make sure that all families that want to participate have that opportunity. Thank you. Okay, appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Program evaluation, gifted programs. Dan Lyons, Amy Kruger, Crystal. Thank you, I didn't want to mess it up. What is that face? Yeah!
Man, I think you sprinkled the magic.
Okay, so, yeah, I know. We are your gifted education department. I'm Amy Kruger. I am a teacher in the high school and the middle school for gifted students and services.
My name is Crystal Svoboda. I am the gifted specialist for K through 2.
And I'm the specialist in our students from 3rd through 6th grade.
So, for our program overview, we do this about every 2 years, as you probably know. So when we do our complete program evaluation, we use these to really analyze and reflect upon the past years. We use these evaluations to help us ensure that we are ensuring the intervention program is based on best practices and we're correctly identifying all of our students and meeting all our program needs. We believe academically gifted students, they come from all backgrounds. So gifted services, it's a tier 2 intervention program. It's not an entitlement for some special smart students. It is a program that's focused on need for additional opportunities that can be provided, that cannot be provided, in a regular tier 1 classroom. So when we see these students are usually high achievers. They're easily able to understand complex, basically abstract ideas. They're able to really understand those ideas more so than the peers in a tier 1 classroom.
Next. Okay, so our goals do align with the district's goals. So
The second one that we're looking at is student achievement, that if we create the expectations and conditions for high quality, responsive instruction and programming, then all students will achieve at higher levels.
When we visited you last April, we set some goals, and so we're still working on those goals. Some of those goals that we set for this year are currently in place now, so we're going to see how some of those changes is hopefully going to be a positive effect on our work. The first one is looking at the Naglieri. The Naglieri, our big push for first grade and our screening happens at the end of first grade. And historically, we've been getting better, then we got worse. And it's really good at identifying a group of kids. It's not very good at identifying the underrepresented groups. Part of that could be in the last 4 years, the second grade teacher, there's been 3 second grade teachers. So having that consistency there, building the relationships. We're also looking at what tools are we using to identify our students. Part of what we're doing to identify is you have to know what you're identifying, and you have to know about the shortcomings of your tools that you're using. So who might you be leaving out from that? Last year, in addition to using our academic data, we moved to the initial screening the creativity assessment, because we felt that we were still just looking mostly on achievement and possibly leaving out a large group of students. That data didn't really bring much change, and so we kept asking ourselves, what can we do? Something new to the project, and a new version that's come out, is the Naglieri Ability Test. This is a new test. We plan to be using it as our initial screener. So as an initial screener, all first graders will be taking this test. All new students to the district from actually second grade on through 8th grade would be going through these universal screeners. We would be looking at their achievement test, give them a creativity assessment, which is short. The Naglieri is also what's nice about it versus the WISC IQ test, which is an hour-and-a-half one-on-one test. This isn't, right now, we're not using it as an IQ test, but we can give it as a group setting. It's computer-based, and it's much bit shorter. We're feeling that this is also going to help identify another large group of students who might be looked over in more traditional identification procedures. I just want to read here because I highlighted it. On the Naglieri is being seen, this is being seen as a new gold standard for unbiased scoring, regardless of each student's primary language, socioeconomic status. I got bifocal right. Not 20, you are. Socioeconomic status, educational history, and our color and vision impairment. This is because the Naglieri General Ability Test utilizes minimal language and written directions to avoid relying on the student's reading ability, their writing, or even language skills. Additionally, only 2 colors are used, blue and yellow. We feel with this as our screener, we're going to be looking at students in a new way. And so students who in a more traditional way of identifying students wouldn't appear, such as our big group is our lower socioeconomic students. This is going to be beneficial for them. And we're hoping that this is going to start bringing some changes. Our other thing that we started talking about is last year we brought to you our new standards that we created. We started aligning them to our units with moving over to its learning to Canvas. I said that right. I keep calling it Canva because that's a big use. Canvas. We've been kind of doing that, but we're looking at getting it actually into a district program, or our district units, and getting better at doing that. So aligning them more directly to what we're doing. And we brought to you last year, we're excited because the units are vertically aligned, and we're looking at how we can start building on that within our programs.
And the final one is reviewing implementation of the high school standards and the service delivery model. So I worked with Sam and Dan closely last year when we were looking at this. How can I best serve these kids when I am full-time in the middle school and have very limited time with the high schoolers? So through newsletters, through student surveys, through taking a day here and there to just set appointments with kids to meet with them, finding out specifically what they need, and getting them hooked up, making connections with college counselors, high school counselors, and really facilitating that coaching behind the scenes with them. Oh, it's me? Oh, yeah, imagine that.
Okay, next we wanted to know who the identified students are that we currently have. And research states that our identified gifted population should reflect our overall district population. As you see here, we found that our gender numbers are equitable, that we have our goal to match percentages but not to mirror it to ensure equity. So in the past, the state would look at percentages. You need to have such and such a percentage of gifted students in your population. They stopped that. We have never done that. We don't look at 5% of your kids should be gifted. No, we are interested in identifying the students who need the services. So we do look at national norms, but looking at national norms, our percentage is in the average range.
Next, I will look at identified suffers. This continues to be something we're working towards. What we've seen between this year and last year, our African American population has dropped by 5 students due to them moving and graduating. Our multiracial group has like skyrocketed. But this is still telling us from last year to this year there hasn't been much movement. So this is telling us something's still not working. We need to be looking and finding something different to help us make this more equitable. As Amy said, our goal is not percentages. Ideally, these groups should reflect the district's population. Our goal is not to meet those, but our goal is to, like I say, our way of reflecting and looking at our work is seeing, are we getting close to that? Where do we still see our discrepancies? We're not proud of this. Unfortunately, it's still a national trend, and we're looking to see if the addition to the Naglieri will help us identify some students that historically might have been looked over.
So from our analysis, we identified 3 key areas that the department needs to focus on. One is to align our standards to our assessments. Second one is to improve our identification process to include more underrepresented groups such as our African American groups and also our free and reduced lunch students. Looking at our initial screeners such as the Naglieri, the CAP, we also use STAR data, teacher observations. This is a lot of qualitative and quantitative data that we're using. And that is going to really help us identify and qualify students that come from all different backgrounds. So we built our goals based on this analysis.
Like you said, our goals are based. So our goals we sort of began with. Our new goals are similar, but we tweaked them a little bit. Our first 2 goals are focusing on our curriculum. Having Chris for the group, and I guess having our new curriculum warehouse, if that's the proper word for it. In my vision, I'm kind of seeing it as a new. We had to share in our Canvas meeting, what are you excited about? And I said all the stuff that was junk that I never knew because they get wiped out, so I kind of have everything in slate. And so working with Crystal, we know we need to really preview and edit those second grade units. So when we start working on these units, we're definitely developing assessments that address the units. So our stage 3 is where our activities are. Are our activities still meeting and helping the students get to our goals that we have for our standards? From that data, our goal is to have, start at 2-3. We're not ignoring middle school, we're not ignoring other grades, but we thought this summer we sit down and we talk about what are we going to do, create a good foundation, and that allow us to continue working and vertically align not only our standards, but our units and what we're doing, so it's building upon each other. A goal that we're looking at throughout next year is that we're doing those units, collecting the assessment, and then seeing if what we need to change in our stage 3 to change to based upon the audit, what we need to change to make it more aligned.
And then the third one, if you're looking at the Naglieri, as we stated before, it is the least biased, most authentic, valid and reliable tool to catch all of our underrepresented populations, our free and reduced lunch kids and anybody that falls within that demographic, such as, again, primary language, students' primary language, socioeconomic status, educational history, color, vision impairment. We're hoping that the addition of the Naglieri will allow students to more fully express their abilities on that performance.
And I don't think, I wouldn't be, but I don't think as a department we see this as our way way to solve this issue. I think keep doing what we're doing, and a big part of helping identify those underrepresented groups is working with teachers, helping them understand giftedness versus really what gifted looks like, and having those conversations with those teachers and seeing the kids in action. And the big thing is developing those relationships so that if you do have misconceptions, there's a level of trust there where you can have that conversation with each other and teacher and administrator.
Any questions for us? For those conversations with educators, is there a structured way to deliver that as a training, perhaps? I understand the value of having one-to-one meetings, but can this be reinforced on a consistent basis? I think it always helps to receive that reminder routinely.
I try to once or twice a month send out, I know he does as well, gifted tidbits. Yes, I think that's what I call it. Gifted things. Have you thought about this? I think that's not what I call it, but that's what came up right now at 8 o'clock. Gifted thoughts, I think is what it's called. And so just, have you thought about this? You have anxious kids, have you thought about this? Kids with questioning, have you thought about this? That has opened the door. I've received emails back. I think a hard time looking with everything is finding that time to have more structure. I think it was helpful for Amy and I with previous years going through the coaching, being able to have those conversations with them, know how to sort of talk with the teachers, but something more formal for current students, but that would be helpful.
So how often are the kids tested? Is it just at the end? I know you mentioned at the end of first grade. Are they tested again after that, or is it just then?
As a screening pool, we do everyone at the end of first grade.
Mm-hmm.
What we currently do is we have spreadsheets of kids' numbers and data. So every time start, we have right now probably 20 kids that I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
Parents aren't aware of this just because they get excited when you're going to test them, when you're going to test them.
Yeah.
They might have some achievement scores, they might have some pieces, but not the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, so we're constantly looking at the data and trying to figure out, and it feels bad in a way, like you're gifted, but you don't have the data to show you're gifted, so you're not gifted,
Mm-hmm.
but having to justify why we're making that decision. So what we have been better at as a department as identifying those underrepresented groups as they've been in the district longer,
Mm-hmm.
especially at the ECC was good, was helpful, but also working with exhibits, I'm able to work with kids in a maybe a more unstructured, untraditional classroom setting,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what they're doing and building relationships that way, where it's also not just building relationships with the teachers, but the kids as well, to really show who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been helpful to that.
So,
But we can test a kid whenever it comes up.
right.
We don't just want to test over and over again, because when I come to your door and pull a kid, everyone knows why I'm there, no matter
Right.
how subtle I try to be.
Right.
And then all the gifted kids, is he in E4? Is it E4? Are they going to E4? And what my heart breaks is when I have to say no,
Right.
and have that conversation with them.
Which is why I was kind of thinking of maybe having a second round a little later on of overall testing, if that's even a possibility, because you're going to have, from what I'm hearing you say, there's implicit bias in the testing,
Yes.
right? And so they're trying to develop something that eliminates as much implicit bias as possible. But part of that is also somebody has to identify this child as potentially gifted to get tested. And if they're not fitting that mold per se, they may not identify them. And so then you have kids that maybe at the end of first grade weren't ready for whatever reasons, but are gifted, that are being missed. Not to keep having you test everybody all the time, but maybe do another mass testing at a certain age group, maybe the end of second, or.
We haven't had that thought. I'm not saying we're not, it's not a bad idea. It's an interesting idea. I think that's something we could look at and see if other districts do that and how they do that. I know, for example, other districts do in fourth grade, if you're in E4, you have to retest, which I have some issues with just from a social emotional aspect of
Right.
you're gifted in third grade, but fourth grade you're no longer gifted.
Right.
But at doing what you're suggesting, that's something we haven't talked about, something we could look into and see what that could look like, or what that would be.
Just a thought to consider. I think you guys do a wonderful job, and I appreciate the conversation about, hey, we see the data, we see what's happening, we think something's missing, how do we find that? But I was just thinking about how, you know, in first grade, well, you know my girls, and in first grade, like, testing them for anything would have been a disaster, but does that mean that never they'll never be tested again? You know what I'm saying?
I think, just to be honest, I think Dan and I are data nerds, and when he says we have spreadsheets for every year. So it's not just a one-shot piece.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly pulling star data, constantly pulling any straight kids are going through. So we are looking, but it is an interesting idea.
It would be interesting just being an old second and third grade teacher and seeing the amount of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes Amy and I use the word cook. Like if you start looking at a kid, they need to cook a little bit longer,
Mm-hmm.
and then they mature, they develop those things, and they show. And we do have a lot of students like that. That in first grade, we're like, you have parts, it's not showing it, and by third grade, they have the complete picture there.
Yeah.
But I think that would be interesting.
You know, what's not lost on me is, I don't know how to articulate this properly. We know that you have strong relationships with the students, but it's with the staff piece that you rely so heavily on. I mean, not so much with you because we don't have quite the turnover that we've had at the upper grades as we've had most, especially in your building over the last 3 years, especially this last year. So I have to think that there's even more work and layers of work that has to be done in developing a relationship with the teacher as well in that identification process.
Thank you guys for all your hard work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Giggle or two.
It's going to depend on Dr. McGee. Who is next? Program evaluation.
Evening, everyone. We're going to look at the curriculum program evaluation, and how I'd like for you to think of it is imagine last year as setting up to this year. Well, I wasn't here last year, so you're going to see some of the data that's going to be incomplete, that when we come back together next year and we look at this exact same curriculum program evaluation, you'll fill in the rest of the pieces. So I hope to paint a little picture. So we looked at, during our board workshop, what exactly is curriculum and how might we define it. So we use it here in a conversation around governance structure that supports the ongoing improvement in decision-making process, designs all of us to oversee the curriculum assessment and professional development. We connect that to our district student achievement goal, as we want our instruction and programming to be of high quality and that students will achieve at higher levels. So we don't have any current goals that we're looking to evaluate, but I want you to imagine this slide as me taking the goals at the end of this presentation, plopping them here, and bringing you data about how we did this year on the goals that I'm proposing for you. So some of the data that's out there is for this year, we have curriculum action team leaders that receive a stipend, and they are helping us implement our goals this year in regards to our data migration from our learning management system. And then we had curriculum writing stipends happen over this past summer. All but one were approved prior to me getting here. So all of that was done in June, and then I have one that is currently in process that's wrapping up here soon that will wrap up our curriculum writing stipend within that budget account. Through the budgeting process, people often look for an opportunity to find new resources and bring in new tools and ways to engage students. And this falls into a budgeting process centered around first adoption. So those things all run through the curriculum office, and we'll be applying a consistent process that we use to make sure our resources are vetted before they enter our classrooms. When we did the activity with the board, as well as with our central office administrators, as well as with our teacher leadership, we said, what is curriculum, and asked them to check a box on all the things they thought curriculum was. The most important thing, it doesn't matter what these words are, it matters that there's a range, okay? We see that there's a large range of people have different definitions of what it is when we say the word curriculum. So what that means to me is I need to make sure that I get on my marketing and get out there and spread the word around what exactly we're doing in regards to putting a lens on curriculum so that we all see curriculum and think it's the same thing. And you notice I highlighted the top 3, which are pretty consistent, which focus on what is the course about, a description of 3rd grade math. We should all be able to gather around that and say that that should be consistent for a 3rd grader to be able to experience. The standards that are aligned with that course and the grade level at which that course sits. So those are some of the things that we're sort of at the top of that. When we ask people what are the most important things, though, the level shifted. Again, we have a wide range, which means that that's something that we need to continue to work on and educate. The top of those are standards, course descriptions, and enduring understandings. And I pretty much can see enduring understandings and our standards being aligned. So I'm looking at those really as our top 2 and most important things that we want to get rallied around. So we're going to be doing that in conversations throughout the rest of the 2nd semester. So moving ahead, data shows that we're going to work on creating a consistent curriculum template so we can actually literally point to a thing and say this is our curriculum for this content and or this grade level. Our proposed goals for this year are to focus on that learning implementation of that learning management system and then developing what that exactly is, a shared understanding of curriculum. So I hope to bring you that exact same slide deck with a very clear, this is what curriculum is, and we all agree on that. So that's what we hope to implement this year. Questions around our curriculum program about? Look at that, I dazzled. All right, I'll take that as a positive thing. Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 405, MSIP 6 update, climate and culture. Dr. Jameson?
We finally have data. Yay.
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 See if I can get this going.
Or we had data.
There we go. Chris, I think this is a sign that I need a new computer.
I think we're on the list for next school year.
That's like
Hold out till then.
July 1. It's not, all right.
How many tabs do you have open?
Right, that's a
Yes,
great
that
question.
might be the issue.
When was the last time
Well,
you
we
rebooted?
just talked about
Here's
that
your cache.
in
And have
in
you
our
updated your
COA
operating
meeting.
system in the past?
So I'm excited, I think, to start off with having conversation about the data that's being presented, but more or less how the board is actually engaged around the data. So we've had a lot of conversations around MSIP 6, and one of those main goals is around leadership. And so with that leadership goal under MSIP 6, boards have to, A, be involved in the CSIP process, which we're in the process now of developing our strategic plan, but the other part of that is continuous improvement and monitoring not only the programs that we have in place, which you've seen program evaluations tonight, in addition to the outcomes that are associated with that. So 2 things that we're looking at here. One is continuous and innovative improvement, more specifically climate and culture data, which is a requirement under MSIP 6. And so there are 4 areas that are lifted out that we must actually comply with. One is around data collection, how we do that, and being very specific about it not just being a singular point in time or a singular piece of data. So not only the surveys that we complete, observations when you're in the classrooms, this also includes looking at discipline data and then triangulating that data to make some assumptions and then creating action steps associated with that. And not only action steps resulting from the end of the year outcomes, but also continuous improvement throughout the year. They also look at student voice. So are we collecting data around what our students tell us? Our students did participate in this survey, but it also would include my conversations with students during my lunch bunch. So we do have conversations around climate, culture, and that also includes what the physical space looks like, what relationships look like, and I'll talk about that as well. How we're responding to data is a major component. So not that we're just getting the data and we're admiring the data, but what actions are we putting in place? what are we purchasing, and how are we using the data to funnel funds to support the needs of the district. And then the piece that we'll talk about at the end when we look at some of the results is how we share the data. And I will say up front, this is an opportunity that we're improving upon. We've started some work with actually being very transparent with our community around the data that we collect so that they know what they are telling us, not only from an aggregated standpoint, but also from a disaggregated standpoint. So I thought it was important to define school climate and culture. People use them interchangeably, but they are very, very different. So school climate is the feel of the school's attitude, the behaviors, points of views exhibited, and then also the student and teacher and other stakeholders, their perceptions of what's happening in the space. Whereas school culture are more around those ritualistic type things and the personality of the school, and then also behavior and attitude. So while they're very similar, they are also very different. So I wanted to highlight those two pieces as we begin to talk about the impact of both. So I thought it was important, the board approved last year's social emotional learning curriculum for K-8. And so that was Second Steps, and Second Steps does a great deal around the safety piece, which is the psychological piece, and also social emotional learning. But there are other components that are comprised when you begin to talk about how do we develop the culture and climate of a building. So the first is around safety. So I talked about psychological safety. It also includes physical safety, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it also includes the relationships that exist in a school and what I would like to call attachment. And so does a student feel like they have a trusted adult, and do they feel that that trusted adult would actually advocate for them, whether it's from an academic standpoint or behavioral standpoint. Again, relationships, and it's not just relationships of student to student, it's student to staff, it's also students understanding how they show up in a space, and as we think about their ability to self-manage, self-regulate, those pieces surface here. And then the teaching and learning component is huge, and so we often think about teaching and learning as it results in the social emotional piece, but it really is coupled in high expectation for all students and how we actually display that, and then how it's actually taught and codified across the school system. The environment is a huge piece. I actually was joking earlier about the seats that we have. It also includes the learning environment, the cleanliness, and so just to talk about our amazing public speaking students in Rich McCollum's class, they talked about flexible seating, flexible spaces, the need for new chairs. That would also go into the climate and culture as we begin to talk about developing a sense of belonging. But the lighting is a part of that, the opening of the spaces and their ability to work and learn in spaces that are not like traditional rows and seats. The last piece is really covered in school improvement and our ability to not only assess what's happening in our schools from a culture and climate standpoint, but the huge piece is how are we monitoring and quickly reacting to the feedback and the data that we get. I would say that that is an opportunity that we still are continuing to work on as we talk about climate and culture, and also being transparent about how we actually react to information, but really getting down granular to ask the question around when we talk about school culture and climate, how are we defining that? How does morale play a part in that, and what other attributes are indicated there? And I will say that there is a relationship to some of the work that we're doing in our CBTF committees and the conversations that we have in our teacher leader committees. So survey says the first part of the data, we are here to serve students, so that's where I'm actually going to start. So I pulled out some key critical pieces. So I will first say that it is important for us to think about the scale, because when I initially looked at the data, I was like, man, this is horrible. But it actually flips when you begin to talk about things around bullying. So I read something and it was like, I get students in my school get bullied all the time, and it was a 2. Well, you want it to be a 2 because students are saying they disagree, but when you look at the other elements or components of the survey, it actually should be a 3 for something else. So it did switch there, but I did highlight for the board some of the critical survey results and where we actually scored higher from a mean level. I want to be very clear that this is an aggregate piece of data, and I am still waiting for the disaggregated data across buildings, because I think that will portray a different picture for us as we begin to talk about where the needs are and how we actually funnel our resources. And this is particularly important when we get to the staff survey results and how we actually use our human capital and how we support them.
So this was on a scale of 1 to 5, is that
1
correct?
to 4.
1 to 4, okay.
1 to 4. So 1 is strongly disagree, and then 4 is strongly agree, and then the full survey is actually attached to the board agenda. So a couple that I pulled out, I can do well in school. So students typically said that they agree. Again, you can see the standard deviation that was listed there. My teacher encourages students to learn. My teacher expects me to do good work. And in case of an emergency, I know what to do. I will tell you that I omitted the younger student results because the scale was yes, sometimes, and then like all the time or something like that. And it was interesting that our littlest learners always said sometimes, so it really wasn't very clear regarding what they thought, like around bullying and sense of belonging and some of those things. So for me, an action step would be to pull a cross-section of students to actually have focus groups and have some questions centered around some of the things that we're seeing to see if trends actually bubble up. Opportunities for growth, again, you know, the standard deviation is there. But they disagreed when we said my school handles discipline fairly. This is not surprising when I look at data across multiple points, that's an opportunity for us to continue to grow as a district. Now again, this is district-wide data. I am very interested in what that looks like across schools. The other is all students receive high-quality instruction. That is definitely one I'm interested in unpacking. Are they talking about AP courses, the opportunity to have access to honor courses? Are they talking about the quality of instruction for students who are struggling? I think that's an area where we want to continue to explore. And I'm also interested in seeing the teachers' direct responses to what some of the students actually said too, because I think that will actually create a good sense of where our opportunities are. The other piece is, if I am overwhelmed because of a crisis, I know how to get help. This directly aligns to our strategic planning work and the survey when we begin to talk about social emotional needs, mental health needs, and how we actually support students across the board. And then the last one that I highlighted, again, these are based on the mean scores where my teacher notices I have trouble learning something. So that was one where I want to begin to unpack that. Do students feel that their teachers know when they are struggling with content, and then also how to help them to ensure that mastery occurs? So this is what our staff told us. They highlighted my principal fosters a shared vision. The school places value and respects differences among students and their families. I recognize the students in my school are in different educational levels. So that one for me created pause, because they say they agree with that and that's occurring, but our students on the previous slide said that they didn't feel that their teachers could identify when they were struggling or different, needed additional support. So I have wonderings around that. Again, this is not very telling when you're looking at it in the aggregate, but it would be interesting to see what it looks like across buildings. And then I emphasize the importance of effort with students. So for opportunities, you see a couple things, and these actually came out, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The school provides teachers time and support for planning. Now, I am not surprised by this one, because the high school currently does not get their full 250 minutes of planning, which is required by the state. We're currently working on that. But on Friday, I do this weird thing where I go sit in spaces and teachers come up and talk to me, interestingly. And this was one of the things that actually surfaced around, not that they need additional time, but they need professional development on how to use the time to more effectively plan, internalize lessons, and have the ability to actually go in and implement those lessons to move the needle for kids. Effective resources and training are provided for teaching students across different languages and cultures. Definitely want to look into that. And then you can see some of the others that are here. And so I want to highlight number 48. There are clear procedures for handling school emergencies. They disagree. That is work that Dr. Dietrich is currently engaging in, and I'm excited about the things that he will be able to do. And the other that I want to highlight is item 50. I usually look forward to each working day as an educator. So again, the standard deviation there is 0.82 and the mean score is 2.98. So it's not technically significant, but for me, because it wasn't a 3 or higher, I really want to begin to understand, is this a building issue? Is it a full district issue? And if it's a building issue, how do we begin to have some of the conversations about that? So I have begun meeting with our union reps to have conversation about why is it this way? And I am beginning to see some trends in specific buildings, so it's not necessarily across the board, and there are some clear things that we can do differently as an administrative team. And here's what our family said. So interestingly, they highlight the things that we talk about respecting culture. So as we are very open about how we support our LGBTQIA students, our families, that is one where we talk about here, and it's highlighted. Their children like attending school. They think the school is in good condition. And remember, the previous conversation that I mentioned is that school environment is a huge piece, and a lot of people don't think about that, whether the school is clean or not, and that's a piece that we're continuing to still work upon, but the parents believe so. And then also they feel comfortable with engaging and having conversation with our teaching corps, which is fantastic because that means that there is a relationship that currently exists and we have something to build upon. But there are some opportunities that they highlighted. So a couple would be around whether or not their students have been bullied or teased, whether or not they are asked for input about school decisions, and then you can see some of the others there. And one that I do want to lift out again, not as statistically significant because of the standard deviation, is around the school prioritizes closing the achievement gap. So we do know that one exists in MRH. We still have work to do, and that is a part of our strategic planning process as we begin to think about goals, strategies, and action steps. That is my presentation around our MSIP 6 culture and climate data. I welcome any questions you may have.
I understand we do not have longitudinal data to compare this to, but do we have a sense that DESE will continue to ask these same questions in future years so that we can measure our progress on this?
So the answer is yes. I actually opted into this strategically because the other piece of that with the changes to MSIP 6 is that we would have been on cycle for continuous improvement, which would have meant that we would have had to have our strategic plan and CSIP done. So it's a little exchange. But I will also say that for those other districts that participated in using this data, my hope is that they begin to show some comparative data around the region so we can see where we fare. But we will continue to take this survey data. I'm also thinking about how we might incorporate additional metrics throughout around the areas where we see we have opportunities. So we'll report the same data and show for next year whether or not we've experienced growth in the areas that we're focusing in on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, strategic planning update, Dr. McGee.
And while he gears up, I made the decision to have Dr. McGee to present the strategic planning work because he is leading and working with our consultant, Aurora. So he will continue to do those updates from now on out.
I am screen sharing in the central office conference room, which is not helpful.
Oh, I guess I need to turn this off. I don't want anyone to see my desktop because it is a mess.
We saw it.
Oh, you saw my tabs too.
We saw all your tabs.
Sorry. I
We
was
know all your business
to
now.
the gift of stuff. I mean, well, it's not going away. All right, give me a second here. Chris, show me how to do it.
So while we're working on that, I wanted to give you just a quick update from our last sharing opportunity.
There you go.
First of all, we gathered for our steering committee on January 12th in the evening. We meet again on February 9th. Yes, it is not full screen for some reason, but it's not about the size of the update. So what we specifically looked at was we looked at the data being presented that we compiled for Insights that included a wide range of information, everything from specific MAP scores to attendance, just about anything and everything, and presented that data. Then we asked what were some of the key insights that we noticed from this data, because with that information it can inform some big buckets at which we could do some of the work that we need to do with our next strategic plan. So if we could, I would get on this device here, and I feel it. This is going to be positive.
I think so too.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen for me now.
It's going to happen.
Yay! There we are. So if you'd like to see the data that we have located and that we shared, and even the ideas that we came up with, after every single one of our strategic planning meetings, I update our agenda on our district site under programs and strategic planning. I always include the agenda, some awkward screenshot that nobody knows is coming, so that way it proves that we were actually there, and then the items down at the bottom with our meeting resources. So there you can see the slide deck that was presented and the compilation of all the feedback. So want to be transparent about the process and where we're going forward. I'll share this as our work in process and draft, is that what we're looking to do is from that conversation of our initial sort of part one of our data discovery, is that we found these big buckets. Now we haven't quite named them what we want to name them yet, but we see that academics and professional growth as being one, mental health and wellness being another, human resources, operation, finance, and facilities, and family and community engagement are our initial big buckets that we're going to be looking to develop action steps associated with it. You'll notice some of our cabinet members are listed on this document because our homework right now is by next week we have to come together with what is a snazzy name, a catchy name that gets us motivated around what might be the vision of this when we achieve this in 2027. What would we say about academics? What would it look like in a very simple phrase? So we're going to be working on that over the next couple weeks, and then we now meet with our consultant weekly instead of it being monthly. So we're going to see a lot of those the items tick up here. We'll have a lot more resources to present at each of our board meetings. Any questions on our steering committee?
Wasn't there something that was being workshopped by Insight that we're supposed to be getting some, can't remember if it was the mission or the vision statement or something, yeah.
Yeah, so we received on January 17th, 2 days ago, drafts of those things. And then I started to play around with them yesterday, and then shared it with Dr. Jameson, and we're commenting back and forth, but we don't believe it's ready for your eyes just yet.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of this content being housed on the website, and I think it's worth highlighting, perhaps in our board notes, which community members have been complimenting Ed on putting together, so thank you for that. People appreciate that digest, but I think this being a consistent resource will be helpful for people to access throughout the year.
Yeah, I do, like I said, want to highlight not only the awkward screenshot, but the meeting resources. We do always put up the slide deck and then anything that we've compiled out of that, so that way people can have access to that content and it's not a mystery as to what we're discussing.
It's also part of MSIP 6 as we talk about who's engaged, and those wonderful meetings I get to attend. We're able to capture that information, and when we have to do response to standards, we don't have to make anything up. We can just go and pull the items down from the website and from the folder, which is very nice and easily accessible.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Communicable diseases update, Dr. Jameson?
No huge updates. We have one active case of COVID at the middle and high school campus. Just one.
Nice.
Generally, how are attendance numbers looking across the district, though, for any illnesses?
That's also an MSIP 6 item, and we're seeing some growth. The elementary school continues to bolster the higher attendance, and so we do have students who have some social, emotional, mental health needs, so we're also trying to combat that, but we still have work to do, particularly at the high school. The middle school is actually making some progress based on their presentation and what they've put in place, but I would say right now focusing in on the high school and being able to close that gap so that we're able to acquire some points. But it is still an opportunity. Right now, we have a team, can't recall who's on the team. I think it was Vince Estrada doing COA. They're going to look at some standard operating procedures and being able to codify, like how do we communicate with parents so that they're in a loop regarding what their child's attendance looks like, and then how do we then begin to use the systems that we have to communicate with families. So I think there is a small monetary piece to that. We have not looked at the initial proposal, but I'm excited about having some processes that we can use PK-12.
I also had a community member ask me about how our teachers are doing with their ability to respond to their own families' illnesses and things like that. I know during the height of the pandemic, we offered additional leave time for folks to, take care of their own health, if they experienced COVID or a family member was experiencing COVID. Obviously in the midst of the CBTF conversations, and everybody ultimately wants to be paid more, but the question around is there enough sick time being offered currently, and is that something that we see potentially being a challenge continuing moving forward, or as everybody regains natural immunity to all the cold bugs that I keep getting, that do we just have, a healthier staff and more ability to, be in, on regular work days sort of thing too. Is again, just a wondering, not asking for any response at this point.
So we are having conversations in CBTF, of course, about leave in addition to compensation. I don't know that I've seen in the numbers that we have had an increase in terms of teachers who have requested leave for family members. There have been some teachers who have requested leave on behalf of themselves, and some extenuating circumstances that deal with FMLA outside of COVID in any type of communicable disease. I think that is certainly something I can check into and continue to monitor. We have had lots of conversations about leave and the appropriateness of what is provided through the district, and looking at other districts in a comparison to see what their leave policy looks like. Having conversations about rolling leave over and some of the restrictions as it relates to how much leave, whether it's sick time or personal leave, teachers are able to bank, and then also some of the earned personal leave options. And so we're having a lot of conversations about what that looks like, and lots of great ideas coming from different perspectives. But I can't say in terms of a family illness that I'm seeing an uptick in that.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, construction update, Chris?
Hello again. So I bring you the construction update as of 1/12 of January. And I won't read the memo to you. We are skirting the margins on our budget, and we are beyond our schedule on our timeline. So from the board perspective, I realize that there's two main goals for our construction project, and that is to finish on time and on budget. Y'all were trying. We've been talking to you for the last couple of months about the efforts we've been undertaking to at least hit the on-time portion of this. And despite our best efforts, Old Man Winter and the spring that continues to try and encroach with the rain and warmer temperatures aren't helping at all. So we every time we gain time, we lose time when the weather comes back and bites us. So we've also been telling you that we've been investigating strategies to potentially open the school year without Building A being complete. The MRH, our general contractor, and our architects met yesterday and got a little bit more serious about that. We have sketched out some plans on what that can look like a little bit more seriously than we have in the past. I believe that if that comes to fruition, that it is viable and we can make that work. I'm not worried about that. Beyond that, as far as the on budget, we are very, very close. and we've talked about in past months, that everything that we do, every time we touch the contract as it was designed, costs us money, and money is a lot more expensive today than it was when we wrote the contract, and that's just an unfortunate reality of our economy. We are trying, we are investigating and looking for every dollar that we can. I was on the phone with our GC general contractor earlier today, questioning $600 that I didn't understand. So in a $20 million, $600 feels like pennies, but you get put enough of those $600 together, you get some pretty big numbers. So we are scrutinizing everything with a fine-tooth comb and doing the best we can. Ryan back here puts in more hours than I'm sure he or his family would like to admit. He and I meet nearly every morning, walk the site, try to devise strategies to increase the pace, to add workers to a particular aspect of the project to accelerate, to lay trades on top of each other out of sequence. So we're doing all of that. What I can tell you is the project is still going exceedingly well in spite of our struggles with the timeline. We have demolition that started in the choir room today. Our choir director has relocated to the theater for the remainder of the school year. Sage remains in place down there. That demolition started right about when we had expected it to, and we expect to have that space down there done potentially by the end of the school year, which would be amazing. We've got our West Stack restrooms. We've passed some of our underground rough-in inspections on the first and third floors. We have those 2 floors should be ready for drywall in the next couple of weeks. So it's very possible we'll at least have some of those restrooms complete potentially by the end of the school year. Notice I'm being cautious with my language here. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but things are moving along very well with the exception of the weather holding us back on the masonry work on Building A. We have excavation that's starting in the next week, steel's coming next week. Once we're under roof, everybody, it's a completely different ballgame. We'll be able to see into the future a little bit more accurately and predict with more surety what our timelines are actually going to be. But until we get that steel hung and a roof on that building, it's still we're working as hard as we can. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. One of our favorite parts of the evening.
Ed is off tomorrow, so he's excited.
I'm excited that Ed is off tomorrow.
Long weekend.
Gives you an idea of the scope. This was a great, at least 2 days this week for favorable for construction.
Want those back?
I was not supposed to walk through the steps, but I did. Because I wanted you to see what it looks like. The construction on the reference is the south wall being nearly complete. So a lot of what you're seeing there is, the precursor to all the utilities that we needed for those spaces, classrooms and offices. So this is the choir room, and I expected there to be this maudlin atmosphere down there today, but instead I ran into Emily Baker, the librarian, and said I offered to swing a sledgehammer at the wall. They would not. I'm trying to demonstrate here that it takes a lot of coordination between our buildings and ground staff before a space can be demolished. It has to be prepared to be demolished, and it takes hours and hours and hours. They worked on this all morning long to get it ready for that. I believe Ms. Maddox is moving local music construction just up the ceiling there in the theater for the time being, but that's the old choir room. Came up from.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed.
Ed, we'll get you a hard hat too, so that you don't get ran out of those areas.
All right, Chris, fiscal year 23, December financial statements.
Okay. All right, I'll go through the summary. The full statements are there for your review. Things are going exceedingly well and right on track for this portion of the year. Our revenue as of December 31st was just about $15 million, which is about 52% of our budget. That's fantastic, and we're right on track with where we should be when we compare that to the prior year. So no worries on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, again, the majority of our cash outlays go towards salaries and benefits. That's the investment in our people. And we are, Dr. Ambers Phillips mentioned CBTF, our Compensation Benefits Task Force. We are deep in the weeds trying to find our way, a path through the compensation and benefits for recommendations for the coming year. So more to come on that in future meetings. But those salaries and benefits as they're budgeted this year are tracking as we expected. We do have, our expenses are right around $16 million, and that's in consideration of the construction project. Our accounts payable specialist just showed me the invoices for our bonded indebtedness today, so about $3 million will be going out the door in the next couple of days for the principal payments for our bonds, paying back our taxpayers. If you look at our operating fund balances, we are projecting about a 42.4% fund balance at the conclusion of this year. That's a planned spend down of our reserves that were in excess of 53% at the end of last fiscal year. I will be bringing you a budget amendment next month. I probably said that before, but things got busy, elementary notwithstanding. So we will bring you that budget amendment next month. That'll adjust primarily the title revenues and expenditures and some other grants that we've received, and general operations, just minor changes here and there. So that will not be an aggressive budget amendment, just to get things a little bit more truer to actual. Any questions?
No? Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Okay, 601 board committee reports. Does anybody have a report they'd like to give?
We have a lot of board committee
There's a lot of reports.
We can go in order of how they're posted. So I'll start with legislative advocacy. And my apologies for not understanding how to fill out the committee reporting form and putting my name in place of the committee name in both of the ones that I filed. So thanks, Kat, for helping me out. The Legislative Advocacy Committee is new this year. We have not met independently from the session we participated in earlier this month with our colleagues in Clayton, Webster, U-City, Kirkwood, and Special School District. Those meetings happen the first Friday of every month at 8 a.m. and will through the end of the legislative session. I did include the slide deck that was presented by Scott Kimball, Director of Legislative Advocacy for the Missouri Superintendents Association. You can see that we have a very bruising session ahead of us when it comes to public education. Pretty much every challenging bill that the legislature can put forward, defining our activities, has come forward, including bills for open enrollment, charter school expansion, tax credit expansion, prohibiting transgender youth participation in athletics, and CRT, Parents' Bill of Rights. So I encourage you all to take a look at the full presentation. It is fairly sobering. For our own efforts, in addition to participating in these monthly sessions to educate us and raise our awareness and help us understand what we as a district need to advocate for, we as a committee need to do a little work around defining what our specific priorities are and how we are going to engage our legislators in our district around those conversations. So more to come from our committee in that regard. I will also note SLPS and Kansas City Public School are collaborating on an advocacy day on the 31st of January in Jefferson City. They have extended the invitation for other school districts to participate. However, all of the arrangements and transportation is really for SLPS families, but I can certainly get more information if we think it's something we'd like to share with our families on short notice.
Thank you, Amber. Are there any other committees you wanted to report on while you have the floor?
I'll report on the scholarship committee, which met for the first time earlier this month as well in the R&D. We have a lot of good ideas about how to maintain and increase the funding that we raised last year for the Nelson Mitten Scholarship. Mr. Mitten has very generously offered to host an in-person event as part of the scholarship fundraising process. So we have come up with a proposal that we have shared with him and are waiting for a response. But essentially we're looking at doing some kind of kickoff for the solicitation. Similar to what we did last year, we will be mailing a solicitation to local businesses, former board members, reaching our alumni by email. We were able to raise a little over $7,000 last year just by asking a lot of people, so we intend to continue to do that. But we want to find a meaningful opportunity for previous donors and prospective donors to come together, not only to kick off our fundraiser, but also on the night of our scholarship evening. We're going to invite our donors this year and potentially host an opportunity after that event for donors and scholarship recipients to have some time together.
That'll be nice.
More to come as we continue to shape that, but we'll be meeting again in February, and we'll be in touch about plans for in-person events as soon as we hear back from Mr. Mitten.
Exciting.
Are you going next, Katie?
Sure. I attended the calendar committee. We are deep in work, and we'll have calendar later this year. So that's about all that needs to be said.
Which calendar would that be? Would that be next
for
year?
2024-5.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I went to CBTF, and we, as Dr. Amherst Phillips said, we had a very extensive discussion about leave and potential of a conversion from a sick personal leave to a combined bank, but we had to discuss advantages, areas of needed research, so we're not there yet. Also reviewed our capstone expedition compensation and equity around that. We are still researching salary schedules and how to make that equitable and competitive, and also discussed instructional time discrepancies between schools. Next meeting will be February 22nd. I'll let you know. And then after that meeting, I went to the Joe's Place meeting.
That was true.
Joe's Place has done quite a few home improvements that are coming to success. They're not quite done yet. And we are currently in the middle of a strategic plan and reviewing things. Hopefully within the next month or two that'll be somewhat finalized. We are always looking for new residents of Joe's Place, and there might be news about that in coming weeks. We are also looking, we slated our officers and are looking for future friend-raising opportunities. Thank you, Dr. Jameson, for that lovely new phrase that I had never heard. So, and that next meeting is February 15th.
I will also point out that I'm planning to attend the school safety committee going forward, and that now that Dr. Dietrich is in place, that committee will be meeting. I think some of the dates that are listed are incorrect, but we'll be meeting, I believe, next in March. So.
Any other committee reports? Okay. All right, calendar of events. So is the Wellness Committee meeting the 23rd?
Yes.
Still? Okay, so it's coming up. We've got a work session on the 2nd of February. The Mid-County Chamber Trivia on February 4th. Academic Calendar Committee, February 7th. And I believe, is there a Joe's Place meeting on the 15th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other calendared events anybody wants to point out?
Yes, a reminder that tables for the PTO trivia night go on sale February 1st.
Oh, good, yeah.
Guess what I'm donating? A day in the life of a superintendent. With a real schedule and a superintendent survival kit after you have gone through a water suppression break and what you need in order to get yourself back to wellness. I posted that on the lovely Facebook and people love it. And I'm giving them a real schedule. So CBTF, maybe the Joe's Place and CBTF night will be a good one.
I'll be at a table at that trivia night.
And that's what they win?
Do you wanna bid on that one?
I
Come on for it. So hopefully it'll be fun. I plan to attend Saturday the Maplewood Sweet Tour. So if any of our families want to tour with me, I love to walk and talk. And I was told to bring Tupperware so I can save some of the snacks that I get. So.
Sounds like a good time. Okay, I'm gonna kind of do 603 and 604 together because they're really about the same.
Okay.
As you know, Annie has left us, and we would have had to have an election for her, involving her, but because we've had 3 openings and 3 candidates that filed for those seats, we will not need to have an election. Those 3 individuals, which includes our Katie, will be sworn in as directors on April 20th, 2023. So that's going to be Katie Kaufman, Christy Martinez, and Joshua Miller. So welcome. All right, action item.
So to that point, we do have a current vacancy with Annie's, with the accepting of Annie's resignation for the next 3 months. I think it is prudent for us to suspend our current policy, which is listed here, because anyone who applies, that process wouldn't really get underway and completed until the new election or the new candidates are sworn in. So,
yes, that's one of our action items, I believe, 703. So nobody has to go through that process for a couple of months.
Right. We certainly would invite the 2, soon to be sworn in members to, attend meetings, join us
Please,
before
join
they,
us.
Officially join the board, but we don't need to go through the process of filling a vacancy.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, yeah, yes.
And we'll start reaching out to, so they will also receive the board governance book, and then Kat has created a beautiful onboarding process, and so we'll start that process with the new members as well to get them up to breast. And we've made some modifications based on the feedback from the survey that Kat created regarding the onboarding process, where we're actually moving forward the finance piece versus where we had it later on, because we'll be getting into the budgeting season. So those adjustments will be made for those new members coming on board too.
Can we add that whoever's leaving the board would have to participate in that process with us?
Maria's.
That's a great idea.
Just a suggestion.
Just a quick question. Although there will not be an election, is there an opportunity for us to host a candidate forum so that our community can learn about our new board members before they're sworn in?
So Kat Norton had a fabulous idea. I want to extol my assistant's virtues, because I think, the speech and debate to host a candidate forum, which I was like, that's fabulous. But when we didn't have to have an election, we pulled that back. I would love to kind of resurface that and have that to be something that our students lead
Linda and I did
plan and actually facilitate for those individuals if the board is open to that.
Absolutely.
Yes,
I think it would be very helpful.
I was going to ask about that too. I mean, at least want to hear something from them.
Is there a month that the board is interested in, so I can begin kind of coordinating with Dr. Grauer and Rich?
March would be good. Yeah. Well, just stay away from spring break.
Yes, will do.
Thank you. Okay, action items, construction change orders.
Move to approve change order 28 is presented.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 2023 COPS.
Move to approve the resolution authorizing the School District of Maplewood, Richmond Heights, St. Louis County, Missouri, to enter into a lease purchase transaction to finance certain capital improvements and authorizing the execution of certain documents and actions in connection therewith.
Second?
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 703, suspension of policy BBE 1.
I move to suspend policy BBE 1 through April of 2023.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Executive session. Yes!
I'm a little rusty. I move to enter an executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 1, 2, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on January 19, 2023 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, real estate, and legal matters.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Ms. Langston?
Yes.
Ms. Whitcomb?
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Goldsman?
Yes.
Ms. Brendan Miller?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. 5-minute recess.
Yes.
It's like this, it makes my allergies. When I go to the doctor tomorrow, I'm gonna ask him like, what is December? He told me that was a bit.